What atomic habits gets wrong, and how to fix it. Section 1. Why habits alone aren't enough. You've probably heard it 100 times. Small habits, repeated daily, lead to big results. It's a comforting idea, one that sells well. But what if it's also incomplete? What if small habits aren't the full story, and in some cases, they might even be holding you back? This isn't an attack on atomic habits. It's a deeper dive into the part that's missing. The part that explains why so many people follow all the steps and still stay stuck. Because the truth is, you don't act based on logic, you act based on identity. And identity isn't just shaped by repetition. It's shaped by emotion, memory, trauma, relationships, and the stories you tell yourself. Let's unpack that. James Clear famously writes, "Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become." That's true, but what if you're unconsciously voting for a version of yourself you don't want to be? Because here's the thing. Habits don't just build identity. Identity filters which habits you'll allow yourself to maintain. That's the paradox atomic habits doesn't fully explore. Let's take an example. You set a goal to wake up early, go to the gym, eat clean. You do it for 5 days straight. You feel amazing, but on day 6, you skip it. Day 7, you feel guilty. Day 8, you're back to your old routine. Why? Not because the system failed, but because your self-image didn't update. Deep down, you still believed you were undisciplined, lazy, inconsistent. So you sabotaged yourself, not consciously, but predictably. This is what psychologists call belief behavior dissonance. It means that when your actions don't align with your deep-rooted self-concept, you experience psychological discomfort. And instead of changing the belief, most people unconsciously choose the easier route. They sabotage the behavior. Why? Because your brain values certainty more than progress. So what's the fix? It's not just about habit stacking or making cues obvious. It's about rewiring the emotional architecture that your habits live inside. Here's how. 1. Surface the story. What core identity do you believe about yourself? I'm not a morning person. I always fall off track. I'm bad with consistency. 2. Interrupt the loop. Use cognitive disputation. Ask, is that belief true? Always? Who gave it to me? What evidence challenges it? 3. Replace with intentional identity. Don't just say, I want to wake up early. Say, I'm the kind of person who protects their peace at sunrise. Make it emotionally charged, not robotic. This is the deeper work that Atomic Habits hints at, but doesn't walk you through. Because real change doesn't start with repetition. It starts with redefinition. You're not just trying to build habits. You're trying to become someone new. And that journey requires more than a cue and a reward. It requires self-confrontation, emotional rewiring, and a commitment to identity-level transformation. Section 2. The Psychology of Habit Failure. What science actually shows. You followed the plan, set the cue, repeated the action, tracked the reward, but the habit didn't stick. Again, it's not that you're broken, it's that the blueprint you're using is incomplete. Let's step outside the popular frameworks and go directly into the psychology and neuroscience behind why habits fail, and what actually drives human behavior. 1. The habit loop isn't the whole story. Most models define a habit as a loop. Cue leads to craving to response, which leads to reward. But this model, while helpful, is only the surface layer. In reality, neuroscience shows habit formation also depends on emotion intensity at the time of the habit. Dopamine spikes before the reward, not after. Belief salience, whether the action feels personally meaningful. This is crucial. Your brain doesn't form habits just because something is repeated. It forms them when the action is 1. Emotionally charged. 2. Dopamine reinforced. 3. Internally congruent. This is why two people can follow the same habit tracker, and only one sees lasting change. 2. The role of dopamine. Motivation, not pleasure. Most people think dopamine equals pleasure. But that's outdated. Modern research from Stanford and Vanderbilt shows dopamine spikes in anticipation, not reward. This means your brain is more interested in pursuing than receiving. If your cue doesn't spark desire, the loop dies before it starts. Let's say you want to build a writing habit. If you associate the cue, sit at desk, with creative pressure or self-doubt, your brain doesn't anticipate reward. It anticipates discomfort. Result? You procrastinate, not because you lack discipline, but because your brain isn't chemically motivated to act. 3. The emotional anchor principle. Habits without emotion don't stick. Think of your most automatic behaviors: checking your phone, reacting to your name, flinching at a sound. They're all emotionally anchored. Behavioral science shows the stronger the emotional context, the stronger the neurological stickiness of the habit. Translation: if you repeat a habit 100 times with neutral emotion, and another habit 5 times with strong emotional charge, the second one is far more likely to stick. This is why motivation-based habits often collapse. They're intellectual, not emotionally embedded. To build lasting habits, anchor them with identity, example, I am a creator. Emotion, example, play music while starting work, immediate wins, example, reward the first 2 minutes. 4. Operant conditioning still matters. Before Atomic Habits, there was Skinner. His operant conditioning model remains a pillar in habit psychology. Behavior type example: habit impact, positive reinforcement, praise after workout, increases chance of repeating negative reinforcement, relief after finishing task also strengthens habit. Punishment, guilt after skipping weakens habit, but may backfire long-term. Extinction, no consequence at all, habit fades quickly. What's important here? Most people rely only on internal willpower, but in reality, external feedback, even subtle, massively impacts whether the habit survives. This is why social accountability works, environment design helps, and tracking systems that celebrate micro wins are powerful. 5. The identity filter effect. You'll never consistently act in conflict with your self-image, even if you want to. This is called self-concept reinforcement. It explains why a smoker trying to quit struggles more if they still think, I'm a smoker trying to stop, than if they say, I'm not a smoker. In one Stanford study, participants who phrased behaviors as, I don't, versus, I can't, showed significantly more habit adherence. Why? Because I don't suggests identity ownership. I can't suggests restriction, and your brain rebels. So what's the real fix? Forget just repetition. If you want your habits to actually work long-term, 1. Emotionally charge your cues. Add music, vision boards, accountability. 2. Use identity statements. I'm a builder, not I'm trying to build. 3. Reward early and often. Dopamine doesn't wait, neither should you. 4. Visualize consequence of inaction. Tie pain not just to the habit, but to staying stuck. 5. Audit your environment. Make sure it whispers your future, not your past. Habits don't just shape your identity. Your identity is the filter through which all habits pass. If you don't update the filter, even the best system will break. Section 3. Why cue-based change isn't enough. One of the most praised strategies from Atomic Habits is this: make the cue obvious. Put your gym shoes by the door. Lay out your journal on your desk. Stack a new habit on top of an existing one. It's elegant, simple, and for many people, it works for a while. But here's the hidden truth most don't talk about. Cues are powerless without readiness. Because no matter how obvious the trigger, if your mind resists the change, the cue gets ignored. Let's break that down. 1. Cue does not equal behavior. Behavioral psychology shows that while cues initiate awareness, they don't guarantee action. Why? Because your brain has an internal filtering system called the reticular activating system, RAS. It determines which sensory input matters and which to ignore. So yes, your shoes are there. Your journal is open. Your water bottle is full. But if your emotional state or belief system doesn't prioritize that habit, RAS simply filters it out. You might see the cue, but you don't feel compelled to act on it. 2. The friction factor. Every action has friction, a psychological and physical resistance that influences whether it's executed. Clear suggests, reduce the friction, make it easy, but not all friction is external. There's internal friction too: mental fatigue, fear of failure, emotional resistance, identity mismatch, shame loops from past failures. These act like invisible weights, slowing or blocking the action regardless of how obvious the cue is. So you might stack your habit: when I finish brushing my teeth, I'll meditate for 2 minutes. But if your mind is still looping unresolved anxiety or distraction, you'll skip it, even if it's easy. 3. Cue fatigue and adaptation. There's also a biological challenge. Your brain adapts to repetition. When a cue becomes too familiar, its novelty fades. This is called cue fatigue. The bright sticky note you placed on your mirror? It grabs your attention for a few days. Then you stop noticing it. It blends into the background noise. This is why habit systems must evolve, not just repeat. Long-term habit formation needs novelty and reinforcement variation to survive. Just like muscles adapt to workouts, your attention adapts to cues. 4. The emotional timing window. One of the most overlooked aspects of habit psychology is emotional timing. The idea that your readiness to adopt a cue is linked to your current mental state. For example, a cue to journal might be effective after a stressful event, when reflection feels needed. But the same cue might be ignored in a distracted state, where scrolling feels more emotionally available. This is why behavior change experts emphasize state awareness. You must match the cue to an emotional window where the behavior feels naturally congruent, not forced. Otherwise, you build resistance, not momentum. 5. The schema filter problem. Your habits pass through what psychologists call mental schemas, internal belief maps about how the world and the self work. If a habit doesn't fit the current schema, the brain treats it as foreign, even threatening. Example: if your self-schema is, "I'm bad at consistency," then even a perfectly placed cue like a reminder app or accountability text will trigger emotional dissonance. You may ignore the cue, delay the action, or self-sabotage after starting. This isn't about motivation, it's about identity conflict. So what works better? Cues still matter, but only as part of a larger behavioral strategy that includes 1. Schema alignment. Reinforce identity with internal dialogue. This is who I am now. 2. Emotional priming. Pair cues with emotional readiness. E.g., meditate after an argument instead of on a timer. 3. Dynamic cue cycling. Rotate visual, audio cues every few days to avoid cue fatigue. 4. Friction mapping. Journal what internal resistance shows up after each missed habit. Not just why I forgot, but why I avoided it. 5. Trigger anchoring. Attach habits to natural emotional cycles, like post-work decompression, morning anxiety, or post-shame spirals. Cues aren't magic, they're reminders, not motivators. And if your internal system isn't aligned, even the most obvious cue becomes invisible. Real behavior change is less about environment, and more about inner alignment. It's not, "What's the next cue I can add?" It's, "What's the belief or emotion I need to shift, so the cue works?" Section 4. When habits become hiding, the shadow side of self-improvement. You built the routine, you set the goals, you checked off the habit tracker every day. From the outside, it looks like discipline. But on the inside, you're still running, just more efficiently. This is the paradox almost no one talks about. Self-improvement can become self-avoidance. Habits can become a mask, and optimization can become another form of emotional suppression. Let's explore the shadow side of personal growth. 1. Habits as coping mechanisms. Habits are often prescribed as solutions, but they can become sophisticated distractions. Reading 20 pages a day, waking up at 5 a.m., cold showers, meditation, deep work, all of these are valuable tools, unless they're being used to avoid something deeper, unprocessed grief. Hidden insecurity, chronic loneliness, lack of purpose. In psychology, this is called adaptive distraction, when a healthy behavior hides an unhealthy emotional truth. It feels productive, but it's just polished avoidance. 2. Identity loops. The productivity persona. There's a danger in becoming too attached to your habits. You start confusing your routine with your worth. Suddenly, "I didn't journal today" becomes, "I'm falling behind in life." This creates a fragile identity, one built not on resilience, but on repetition. If the routine breaks, even for a day, the self-image collapses. This is the trap of habit-based self-worth. You're not building yourself, you're maintaining a persona. And the more efficient the system becomes, the harder it gets to see you've been emotionally static. You've moved a lot, but you haven't changed. 3. The illusion of progress. James Clear says, "Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become." That's true, but here's what's missing. Not every vote counts equally. Some actions are symbolic, others are transformational. Drinking water instead of soda? That's a micro shift. Breaking a trauma-anchored belief about self-worth? That's a tectonic shift. When habits become checkboxes, we mistake motion for momentum. But in real psychological growth, stillness can be progress. Rest can be transformation. Slowing down can mean you're finally confronting what habits helped you ignore. 4. The suppressed self. Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Nowhere is this more true than in routine addiction. When we compulsively optimize every part of our life, we risk disconnecting from the messy, chaotic, human part of ourselves. The sad part, the angry part, the uncertain, aimless, craving part. If we only focus on controlling behavior, We never learn how to listen to pain. Habits become armor, but armor can't feel, and eventually, it rusts. So what's the alternative? We don't need to abandon habit building. We need to build with awareness. Here's how to escape the optimization trap. Audit the why behind each habit. Ask, is this helping me become, or hide? Schedule emotional work, not just physical habits. Journaling, therapy, silence, shadow work. 3. Break your own routine once a week. Let go of control. See what emotions rise. 4. Build anti-habits. Create space for spontaneity, curiosity, rest. 5. Use habits to reveal, not replace, your pain. Let the discomfort surface. That's where growth lives. A habit is not healing if it keeps you from facing the wound. And personal growth isn't progress if it's just performance. Sometimes, the most courageous act is to stop optimizing and start listening, because beneath the routine, there's a truth waiting to be heard. Section 5. You don't need more discipline, you need less friction. You keep telling yourself, I just need to be more disciplined. But what if that's not true? What if the problem isn't that you're weak? It's that your environment, your emotions, and your energy are constantly working against you. Most people think success is about pushing harder. But real behavioral science shows this. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems and your friction. Let's break this down. 1. The myth of willpower. Willpower is often glorified in self-help. But psychologists like Roy Baumeister discovered something crucial. Willpower is a finite resource. It gets drained by decision fatigue, emotional strain, poor sleep, overexposure to temptation. So when you say, I just need more discipline, you're often trying to fight exhaustion with force. That's like trying to sprint on a sprained ankle. You don't need to push harder. You need to stop the bleeding. 2. Friction points are everywhere. James Clear talks about reducing friction, like laying out your gym clothes the night before. But most friction isn't about clothes or alarms. It's invisible, emotional friction. What if I fail again? Social friction. What will they think if I try this? Identity friction. I've never been that kind of person. Habit friction. This feels unfamiliar and awkward. And worst of all, cognitive friction. When the task isn't clear, so the brain stalls. Even a 5-second pause of uncertainty can kill momentum. 3. The physics of behavior. Think of every action like a ball rolling down a slope. If the slope is smooth, then action flows. If the slope has pebbles, cracks, or sharp turns, then the ball stops. Friction is those pebbles. And here's the trick. Most people try to make the ball roll harder, instead of clearing the path. It's not about getting more motivated. It's about getting more friction aware. 4. Your environment is either a magnet or a trap. Behavioral scientist B.J. Fogg found that environment shapes action more than motivation. If your phone is next to your bed, you'll scroll before sleeping, even if you plan to read. If your workspace is cluttered, you'll find a reason to clean instead of create. Your environment is not neutral. It's either pulling you toward your desired identity, or anchoring you to the old one. This is why reducing friction doesn't just mean doing less, it means doing differently. So how do you design for frictionless flow? 1. Create micropaths. Break tasks into absurdly small steps. Example: open Google Docs is a win. 2. Use action staging. Put your tools where your habits happen. Example: notebook on the pillow if you journal at night. 3. Add exit barriers to distraction. Use grayscale mode, app blockers, or lock phone in another room. 4. Practice habit scripting. Write the exact first 2 steps of a habit in advance. No thinking equals no hesitation. 5. Redesign emotional friction. Ask, what fear or identity conflict is stalling me? Then journal it. Don't fight it, understand it. You don't need a stronger version of you. You need a smarter system around you. Because in the end, discipline doesn't defeat friction. Design does. So stop blaming your will. Start adjusting your world. Section 6. The reward system. Why dopamine may be misleading you. You've probably heard this before. Every habit is driven by a craving for reward. And sure, reward is part of the habit loop. Cue craving response reward. But here's what Atomic Habits oversimplifies. Dopamine isn't about reward. It's about anticipation. And sometimes, that anticipation can backfire, guiding you toward short-term comfort while sabotaging long-term change. Let's explore how the reward system actually works, and how it misleads you more than you think. 1. Dopamine is a prediction engine. In neuroscience, dopamine isn't a chemical that makes you feel good. It's a signal that says, something good might happen soon. It spikes before the reward, not after. So when you open social media, dopamine fires before you see anything. When you check your notifications, dopamine fires before you even read them. This makes dopamine incredibly habit-forming, but also dangerously misleading. Because you're not craving the reward itself, you're chasing the possibility of pleasure. And that's how you fall into the loop of tap, scroll, nothing meaningful, repeat. 2. The brain loves immediate feedback. Your brain is designed to reinforce behaviors that give quick results. That's why junk food beats a salad, checking likes beats reading a book, complaining feels better than solving a hard problem. Dopamine favors speed over significance. And that creates a tension. The habits that matter most often feel worst at the start. You don't get a dopamine hit from 10 minutes of meditation. You get it from the urge to skip it. This is why clear's "make it satisfying" rule isn't always practical. Most deeply meaningful habits, like writing, therapy, or fitness, are delayed gratification systems. If you build your habit loop around dopamine alone, you'll always choose the path with the quickest hit, not the deepest reward. 3. Reward does not equal fulfillment. There's a difference between something that activates dopamine and something that fulfills you. Dopamine is excited, fulfillment is calm. Dopamine wants more, fulfillment is enough. Dopamine is addictive, fulfillment is sustainable. If your habits are built entirely on the feeling of reward, you're actually training your brain to stay stimulated, not satisfied. This leads to chronic dissatisfaction, even when your goals are being met. You're always achieving, never arriving. 4. The reward prediction error. In psychology, there's a concept called reward prediction error. It means, when the reward is smaller than your brain expected, dopamine drops sharply. This explains why the gym session didn't feel worth it. The book didn't change your life. The journal entry felt boring. Your brain overestimated the payoff. So when the result didn't match the fantasy, motivation collapsed. That's why we quit, not because we didn't get a reward, but because the reward didn't match the hype. So what actually works? Instead of dopamine chasing, build habits with depth psychology in mind. 1. Use reflective rewards. After a habit, ask, what internal shift happened here? 2. Rewire emotional memory. Journal how you felt after the habit. That becomes the new reward, not just outcome. 3. Delay the dopamine. Don't celebrate right away. Train the brain to wait, reflect, then appreciate. 4. Build value, not just habit. Ask, what kind of person does this action reinforce? 5. Teach your brain fulfillment. Habits should feel meaningful, not just stimulating. You're not a dopamine machine. You're a meaning-making mind. And while dopamine helps you start a habit, only depth helps you keep it. Don't chase the reward, build the identity. Section 7. When discipline becomes suppression, the emotional cost of rigidity. Discipline is powerful. It builds momentum, consistency, and identity. But here's the shadow side. Sometimes, what you call discipline is just emotional suppression with a productivity filter. And the more rigid your systems become, the less you feel, and the more you ignore what your body, mind, and emotions are trying to say. Let's dive into the hidden cost of making discipline your entire identity. 1. The rise of discipline porn. Social media glorifies ice baths at 5 a.m., 3-hour morning routines, hustle without breaks, no emotion, just grind. This isn't discipline, it's emotional bypassing. You're not conquering yourself. You're often just avoiding your emotions through control. The danger? You stop asking, is this good for me? And only ask, did I do what I said I would? That's not growth. That's self-abandonment disguised as achievement. 2. Suppression does not equal mastery. You might feel in control when you stick to a strict diet. You follow a rigid habit schedule. You never miss a morning ritual. But if your entire self-worth depends on never slipping, you're not building mental strength. You're building psychological fragility. Why? Because real mastery includes flexibility, self-forgiveness, emotional fluency, rest and recalibration. Discipline without emotional awareness becomes a prison, one where relapse feels like identity collapse. 3. The nervous system in hyper-control. From a trauma-informed lens, chronic rigidity is often a fight response. The body says, if I control everything, I'll finally feel safe. This leads to anxiety masked as ambition, burnout rationalized as work ethic, fear of failure covered by perfectionism. What you're calling grind might be a trauma response in disguise. You're not being resilient, you're just numbing efficiently. 4. When self-discipline becomes self-punishment. Discipline should serve your healing, not fuel your punishment loop. If your inner critic uses your habit system to shame you when you slip, you've weaponized your routine against yourself. This is when missing a day equals spiral of guilt. Rest equals discomfort. Spontaneity equals anxiety. You're no longer growing, you're surviving under the weight of your own expectations. So how do you reclaim discipline with compassion? 1. Allow flexibility in your routines. Progress isn't linear, neither is healing. 2. Track how you feel, not just what you do. Use journaling to spot emotional patterns beneath habits. 3. Build in grace windows. One day off does not equal failure. Recovery is part of the process. 4. Define discipline differently, not as rigidity, but as the ability to return, again and again, with love. 5. Make your inner voice your teammate. If your self-talk is harsh, your systems will break the moment you do. You don't have to choose between ambition and peace. The healthiest discipline is built on self-respect, not self-erasure. Remember, you are not a machine. You're a human being learning how to live with intention. Don't silence yourself in the name of progress. Listen, adjust, evolve. Section 8. The myth of atomic. Why small habits aren't always enough. James Clear's core philosophy is powerful. Small habits lead to big results. And in many cases, that's true. Tiny changes can compound. A 1% improvement each day can transform your life. But here's the brutal truth. Not every problem is solvable with small habits. And some problems? They require radical, messy, uncomfortable change. Let's break the atomic illusion and talk about what really moves the needle when small steps just aren't cutting it. 1. Small habits are great until they delay necessary action. The idea of atomic habits can become a trap. Instead of starting the business, ending the toxic relationship, changing your environment, going to therapy, you start meditating for 2 minutes, journaling your goals, drinking more water. Helpful? Sure. Transformational? Not always. Sometimes, the very act of building small habits delays the real decisions. Micro behavior can become macro avoidance. 2. Systematic change requires systemic disruption. Some life changes are too big for atomic shifts. If you're dealing with addiction, trauma recovery, toxic work, life environments, deep identity conflict, you don't need habit stacking. You need pattern breaking. That means leaving environments that trigger you, cutting off certain inputs completely, rewiring belief systems from the ground up. Atomic habits are like adjusting your sail, but sometimes you need to burn the old boat. 3. The neuroscience of threshold moments. The brain doesn't always change through slow repetition. Sometimes it changes through emotional shock and identity rupture. These are called threshold experiences, moments that shift your entire operating system. A health scare, a breakup, a loss, a powerful confrontation with truth. Small habits maintain systems, but major breakthroughs often rebuild them entirely. If your system is broken, don't optimize it, reconstruct it. 4. The identity paradox. Clear says, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. That's beautiful and true. But what if the type of person you're trying to become is based on a false self? If you're trying to become more disciplined because you secretly hate yourself, more productive because you feel worthless without output, more calm to hide your anger, then all your tiny habit votes are electing the wrong identity. Sometimes you don't need a new habit, you need a new question. Who am I beneath the habits I've been building? So when are small habits not enough? 1. When the foundation is cracked. Don't build tiny steps on top of unresolved trauma. 2. When urgency is required. Some change can't wait 6 months of 1% gains. 3. When your environment is poison. You can't meditate your way out of toxicity. 4. When your self-concept is false. You can't habit hack your way into self-worth. It comes from self-inquiry. 5. When you've been stuck for too long. Repeating the same rituals may actually be reinforcing the loop. Yes, atomic habits work. But sometimes, transformation requires a psychological earthquake, not just another to-do list. Don't be afraid to take radical action when your soul knows small steps won't save you. Section 9. The plateau of latent potential is real, but so is learned helplessness. One of the most powerful metaphors in atomic habits is the plateau of latent potential. The work you do is not wasted, it's just being stored. Breakthroughs happen suddenly, after a long period of invisible progress. It's true, mastery often requires persistence through the void, but what the book doesn't fully address is this. Sometimes, the plateau isn't a test of patience. It's a sign of psychological paralysis. Let's unpack the difference between healthy persistence and learned helplessness in disguise. 1. The plateau metaphor is incomplete. Yes, plateaus are real. You work, wait, and eventually break through. But not all plateaus are created equal. Some are part of growth, delayed compounding, part of burnout, part of self-doubt, part of a system that isn't working anymore. Clear encourages you to just keep going, but that advice can backfire when you're working hard in the wrong direction. Repeating habits that are no longer aligned, stuck not in patience, but in paralysis. 2. Learned helplessness, the silent plateau. Psychologist Martin Seligman coined the term learned helplessness. When someone is repeatedly exposed to failure or uncontrollable outcomes, they stop trying, even when opportunities arise. This isn't laziness, it's a psychological freeze response. You might be journaling every day but feeling numb, exercising regularly but still loathing your body, meditating but avoiding the real emotional work. You're doing the habits, but they've become survival tools, not transformation tools. This is when the plateau of latent potential becomes a loop of self-protection. 3. Consistency isn't always progress. You're told, just show up. Consistency compounds, but if what you're showing up to reinforces shame, ignores your real emotional needs, validates perfectionism, then you're not compounding growth, you're compounding damage. Not all consistency is healthy. Sometimes quitting a broken system is braver than repeating it. 4. Stuck does not equal lazy. It might mean you've hit a wall of identity. What Clear calls a plateau can sometimes be a psychological identity block. You're not improving because your internal belief system still says, I'm not good enough. Your nervous system isn't regulated enough to risk change. Your environment is emotionally unsafe for reinvention. This isn't a call for more discipline. It's a call for more introspection. What to do when the plateau feels like a cage. 1. Audit your internal state. Am I tired or trapped? 2. Challenge the loop. What am I doing out of fear, not alignment? 3. Infuse emotional work into your habits. Ask, what do I feel when I do this? What am I avoiding? 4. Pause and rewire. Take time away not to quit, but to reapproach with clarity. 5. Reconnect to meaning, not metrics. Stop chasing streaks. Start chasing truth. Not all plateaus are sacred. Sometimes the lesson isn't be patient. It's wake up. This system isn't serving you anymore. You're not failing. You're evolving. The plateau ends when the truth begins. Section 10. The real habit is identity, but identity is a story you can rewrite. James Clear says, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. It's a profound truth. Your habits don't just change your behavior. They shape your identity. But here's where Atomic Habits only scratches the surface. Identity is not fixed, but it feels fixed when it's built on old pain. You can build all the habits in the world, but if your core story is still, I'm not worthy, I'm always the one who fails, I'm broken, then you'll keep self-sabotaging, no matter how many systems you stack. Identity is a psychological story, not a fact. Your identity is not who you are, it's who you believe you are, and those beliefs are shaped by childhood programming, cultural narratives, emotional trauma, survival strategies. That means you can change your identity, not by pretending, but by rewriting your internal script. Why habits fail without identity work? You might start waking up early, go to the gym consistently, journal every night, but deep down, if you still feel like a fraud, you'll burn out or sabotage the progress. Habits without self-concept shift become exhausting. You're swimming against your own story. This is why many people relapse, quit, or plateau. They're still arguing with their old identity. Your brain protects the story it knows. The human mind seeks consistency more than success. If you've always been the underachiever or the shy one, success will feel like a threat to your identity, not a reward. That's why confidence feels fake. Progress feels uncomfortable. Visibility triggers anxiety. You're not afraid of growth. You're afraid of betraying the version of yourself you've always been. So how do you rewrite identity? 1. Name the old story. I always give up. I'm not creative. I can't stay consistent. 2. Disprove it with evidence. Recall moments you did follow through. You were bold. 3. Create an identity anchor. A new internal truth. I'm someone who comes back stronger. I'm someone who turns pain into purpose. 4. Attach habits to who you are, not what you want. Not, I want to write, but I'm a writer. 5. Speak it out loud, even before you believe it. Identity rewiring starts with repetition, not results. You're not faking it, you're rebuilding it. Your real identity isn't in the streaks you keep. It's in the truth you accept about yourself. You are allowed to outgrow the version of you that survival created. Final reflection. You've now seen where Atomic Habits excels, where it simplifies the complexity of change, how to go beyond productivity and into psychological evolution. Change your habits, yes, but even more, change the stories that wrote your habits in the first place. This is the psychology behind the books. Subscribe to the book Psych, where we break patterns, not just summarize them.